What's happening, everybody? We're back again. Corey Hughes, Bloody History, Decker Exhibit 5323. It's basically a compilation of Sheriff's Department statements. Some good, some not so good, some irrelevant, some not so irrelevant. This one that we're going to cover now is intriguing. Very intriguing. I read about this a long time ago. I tried to make something out of it, but I couldn't. So, hey, if you can make something out of it, let me know. Statement of Jesse James Williamson. Is it Williamson or Williams? Because it doesn't really say. Williams. Okay. It looks like it said Williamson, and then they corrected it. Jesse James Williams. Last Tuesday evening at approximately 12:15 a.m. Wednesday morning, a lady friend and myself, we had just made an acquaintance of a man who invited us to his motel for some after-hours drinks after 12 at night. I don't have his name, but I have the license number of the car he was driving. I left my car at the parking lot near the Baker Hotel in Dallas, and we proceeded to his motel, a large kitchenette motel. As you go across the Houston Street Viaduct, it is the first motel on the right. It's a big white motel, not too modern. I don't know the name of it. After the three of us got to his motel, where he was previously registered, we had a few drinks in his room. He then proceeded to entertain us with a mandolin and seemed to be pretty good with it. We had been there about 30 minutes, as well as I remember. About this time, the fellow began to make indecent remarks to the woman, to the effect that he wanted her to get in bed with him. We'd all been drinking. I was fairly well polluted, more so than the others, but still had my mental and reasoning powers. At this point, I objected to his language and overtures, and we became involved in an argument of words. Something came up to the effect that he must be a queer or something. Then he tells me to get the hell out of there, and if there's not going to be a party, then get the hell out of the place, I believe is the way he said it. And as I turned to walk toward the door and told the woman with me, let's go, he pulled a rifle out of the closet, put a round in the chamber and pointed it at me and said, leave. In so many words, that's what it amounted to. As the woman and I got to the door, he said, I should make you strip. Let me see your beautiful body. With that, we walked out the door. He left the rifle inside the room and came outside and told us to get back into the car. And he would take us back to the car. After some more conversation to the effect that I didn't appreciate that we had done and this and that, and he pulls a pistol. I don't know where it came from, whether from his pocket or from the seat of the car on the left. He had the pistol in his left hand. We were still in his car. Just as we were about to get out, he said to sit still, and the woman put her hand on the barrel of the gun and told him to point it the other way. She was scared. I said to her, let's go, and opened the car door. We got out of the car and walked over to our car, which was about 6 feet away from his at the time. He drove off in his car. The woman and I both got the license number of his car. We each repeated it aloud to each other. I continued to repeat the number until we got into my car, and the woman wrote the number down and on the back of a checkbook that was laying on the dash of my car. That was the last time I saw of him. This man, to the best of my recollection, was approximately 5'8" tall, weighing 175 pounds, dark hair, normal complexion, about 30 years old. Didn't appear to be a learned person. Was too well educated and did not appear to be ignorant by any means. The woman friend says that he had a real wavy black hair and was, in her opinion, 5'10", would weigh about 165, about 30 years old. Who's the only person in this cast of characters that matches this? Emilio Santana. But do I think it's him? Probably not. This could be something completely fucking irrelevant. But if I had to pin this to somebody in the cast of characters, it would be him. Nobody else matches that description. 30 years old, black hair, curly. Nah. But probably not. Realistically, this is probably a completely fucking irrelevant event. The best I can describe the rifle, it appeared to be well kept, a deer rifle or something. I don't know much about it. It wasn't a .22. I know it was larger caliber gun, perhaps maybe a .303. That would be my guess what it would be. It had a chrome appearance about it somewhere. I heard him cock the pistol as he told us to sit still, and I got very dim look at the gun. It seemed a long barrel like a police officer normally carries. We both agreed it was like a light green car, a new model, somewhat on the smaller side, about like the appearance of a Chevy 2. Says it was an extremely light green. The license number on the car was CD 1583, Texas. After the tragic incidents that occurred in Dallas this date, upon the killing of the police officer, I thought about the incidents related above and the man with the rifle in the car, and for these reasons, I decided to give the information contained herein to the proper authorities for whatever value it may have. A good job coming forward to the police, but I was probably irrelevant. All right, Eddie Piper, employee of the book depository, janitor, age 55. I've been employed as a janitor for the Texas School Book Depository for a little over 4 years. I do the packing of the books as well as the lockup at night. I came to work yesterday about 10 a.m. and I work until 7 p.m. There's been a man that I know only as Lee who's been working there about 5 weeks. He fills the orders and I pack the orders. Yesterday at 12 noon, this fellow Lee says to me, I'm going up to eat, and I went on to my lunch. I went to a front window on the first floor and ate my lunch and waited to see the president's parade go by. I saw the president pass and he heard some shots and looked at the clock there and saw it was 12:25 p.m. The shots seemed to me like they came from up inside the building. It was about 1 p.m. when the police made us vacate the building as we were being checked out. I noticed that Lee wasn't with us, and I mentioned it to some of the employees there, checking out that Lee wasn't there, and somebody said he must have already gone out. This man Lee's never talked too much to anyone, hardly ever said anything to me. He pretty much kept to himself and hardly even answer when I would say good morning. All right. Next one, Malcolm Summers. Witness. Yesterday, November 22nd, 1963, I was standing on the terrace of the small park on Elm Street to watch the president's motorcade. The president's car had just come up in front of me when I heard a shot and saw the president slump down in his car, and he and Mrs. Kennedy said, "Oh no." Then a second shot, and I hit the ground as I realized these were shots. Then all the people started running up the terrace away from the president's car, and I got up and started running also, not realizing what had happened. In just a few moments, the president's car sped off, and everybody was just running around towards the railroad tracks, and I knew that they had somebody trapped up there. I imagine I stayed there 15 or 20 minutes and then went over onto Houston Street where I had my truck parked. I just pulled away from the curb and was headed towards the Houston Street Viaduct when an automobile that had 3 men in it pulled away from the curb in a burst of speed, passing me on the right side, which was very dangerous at that point, then got in front of me. And it seemed then, as an afterthought, slowed in a big hurry in front of me, as though realizing it would be conspicuous in speeding. These 3 men were of slender build, seemed to be very excited and talking and motioning to each other. They went across the Houston Street Viaduct. I turned off at Marsalis Street exit. They continued going towards Zangs Boulevard. They were in a 61 or 62 Chevrolet sedan, maroon in color. I don't believe I could identify these men, but I do believe I could identify the automobile if I saw it again. Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of automobiles and station wagons, particularly, involved in the post-assassination, stuff. Seen driving around Dealey Plaza chaotically. So one of them was a white Pontiac, and a rifle was seen in the back seat at a gas station, right? So Ryan Dawson told me straight up that was George Senator in that vehicle. I haven't even bothered to take the time to look into that, but I know George Senator, and we'll get to him eventually. George Senator's statements were completely full of fucking shit. So yeah, I don't doubt that at all. God, it would really nice if Ryan Dawson would open up to some of the stuff that he knows instead of taking it to the grave with him, which is what he actually plans on doing. So yeah, a bunch of vehicles, a lot of station wagons involved. All right, next one. William Clifford Anderson, age 22. I'm presently living at 2503 Kilburn, where I have a room with Mrs. Rogers. The telephone number is FR 4-1170. My folks live at 5125 Corrigan, Dallas, and the telephone there is FR 4-8331. I'm employed for Joe Summers, Loop 12 Conoco service station at Loop 12 in Lancaster Road. The telephone number there is FR 6-6766. On Saturday, November 16th, 1963, a man whose name I do not know moved into the cottage behind 2503 Kilburn that he rented for Mrs. Rogers. He rented this cottage for 1 week. Another man has been to this cottage named D.H. McFadden. McFadden's 26 or 27 years of age, dark hair, heavy build, 160 to 170 pounds. The other man I've not seen but one time. I can not be sure of a good description of him. These other 2 men either come in late at night or early in the mornings. The other odd thing is that they always park their cars by backing them into the driveway. One of the cars is a 2-tone Pontiac, about a 58 model. The other is a foreign-made car, and it's black. They both bear Texas license plates. Last Friday night, I've been over to my girlfriend's house and had left there about 11 p.m. and went directly home. This took me about 20 minutes, and as I went directly home, I went to bed, and sometimes I think must have been early Saturday morning, I heard voices outside my window on the walk. One person was saying, "Well, it's over." The other man said, "Keep quiet. That guy's probably still awake." I heard nothing else and went back to sleep. This morning, Mrs. Rogers told me she'd not seen them anymore, and I went out to the cottage and looked around. I found 3 30-30 caliber shells, a photograph taken at Guthrie's at Corinth and Industrial, and another picture and a letter and an envelope. I picked up these things after thinking about what had happened and the conversation I overheard and brought them to Dallas County Sheriff's Office. To me, these 2 men have acted peculiar all week, and after hearing them early Saturday morning, they have disappeared. The man in the picture from Guthrie's is the McFadden man. That's interesting, right? All right. Supplemental investigation report. Reference assassination of President Kennedy from Harry Weatherford, deputy sheriff. On November 23rd, 1963, about 12:30 p.m., I was standing in front of the sheriff's office watching the presidential motorcade. The president's car had passed my location a couple of minutes, and I heard a loud report, which I thought was a railroad torpedo, as it sounded as though it came from the railroad yard. Thinking this was a heck of a time for one to go off, then I heard a second report, which was more of an echo report, and thought to myself that this was a rifle, and I started towards the corner where I heard a third report. By this time, I was running towards the railroad yards, where the sound seemed to come from. I got with Deputy Alan Sweat and was searching the tracks and cars, etc. Then someone said the shots came from above. I then went to the Elm Street loading gates of the Texas School Book Depository, where I met Deputies Ralph Waters, Luke Mooney, Eugene Boone, and Sam Webster. He all went into the building and proceeded to the first floor by way of the stairs. I jumped out the first window onto the roof of the adjoining covered loading dock. I then searched the roof for any expended shell cases, as at this time we were trying to find just where the shots came from and if they were fired from the west side of the building. Hang on a second. Let me reread some of this and try to put it in a better perspective with the timeline. So what exactly is he saying here? By this time, I was running towards the railroad yards where the sound seemed to come from. So we're between almost 12:31 at this point. I got with Deputy Alan Sweat and was searching the tracks, cars, etc. So he's there for a couple minutes. It's not immediate. I then went to the Elm Street loading gates of the Texas School Book Depository, where I met Deputies Ralph Waters, Luke Mooney, Eugene Boone, and Sam Webster. Okay, gotcha. We all went in the building and proceeded by the first floor by way of the stairs. This motherfucker is... Let's try to figure out exactly what time this would have been, all right? Because I have my suspicions. He's making it seem like it's fairly quickly, within a couple minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, and I don't think so. I think it's going to be longer than that. It's going to be much longer than that. I jumped out the first window onto the roof of the adjoining covered loading dock. Remember, so Baker and Truly have already had to have gone into the building because these cops didn't come in until after Baker and Truly did their thing. Baker and Truly didn't enter the fucking building till 12:37 p.m. They go upstairs, they deal with William Seymour. William Seymour is out the fucking side door at 12:40 p.m. I'm willing to wager that it was after 12:40 p.m. that he did this. After 12:40 p.m. I then searched the roof for any expended shells, blah, blah, blah. Finding no shells, I then climbed into the window and started searching the first floor with an unknown DPD detective. Yeah, see, all the other cops didn't go in there until after Baker and Truly got down from their fucking trip up to the 6th floor and back. Then learning other officers were searching the first floor, I went to the top floor and start down with each floor. Looking over the 7th floor to no avail, I came to the 6th floor, and while searching the 6th floor, Deputy Luke Mooney said, "Here are some shells." I went over to where he was and saw 3 expended rifle shells. Well, we've already gone over this in explicit detail on the show and in my book. There's a lot of conflicting evidence over how many shells were actually located that day because the actual documentation doesn't indicate 3. None of the documentation indicates 3 until the 27th. The only indications we have that there are 3 are things like this. Like Luke Mooney wrote this fucking report. Said there were 3 shells. But we don't really have any documentation. The police crime scene reports, all that stuff says 2 shells. So what are we supposed to make of that? Horrible police work? Of course. Of course. I went over to where he was and saw 3 expended rifle shells, a sack on the floor, and a partially eaten piece of chicken on top of one of the cartons, which was used as a barricade. Okay, but that's bullshit because the chicken was on the 5th floor, you idiot. The chicken was on the 5th floor, not the 6th floor. So what the fuck are you talking about? I then proceeded to look for the rifle. It was possible it was still on this floor. After several minutes passed, I was about 10 feet from Deputy Boone when he found the rifle with a light he was using. This also was preserved for the crime lab. I then left the building and went to the sheriff's office to contact Sheriff Decker and report our findings. While we were standing in the hall talking, Sheriff Decker gave me a piece of paper with an address of 2515 West 5th Street, Irving. He said to get deputies Buddy Walters in Oxford to go see if they could find what they could find at this location, as this man had shot the officer in Oak Cliff by the name of Oswald supposedly lived at this location, and further that we are to meet some of Captain Fritz's officers at this address. Upon arrival at the address, we saw a DPD plainclothes car about a half a block from the address. In this car was Detective Rose and Adamick and another officer whom I did not know. We went to the door and knocked, and Mrs. Payne came to the door. I showed her my ID and told her we were from the sheriff's office, and she invited us in. She also asked if it pertained to the shooting, and we told her yes. She introduced us to Mrs. Oswald and advised that she could talk only a few words in English and that she was Russian and that she would interpret anything we wanted to know. We told Mrs. Payne we wanted to search her home, and she told us to go ahead, and she understood. I stayed with Mrs. Oswald and Mrs. Payne while the rest of the men searched the house. They found some literature on Cuban freedom affairs and some small files and a blanket which looked to have been wrapped around a rifle. While standing near the phone bar, I saw a black telephone address book, which I picked up and thumbed through, finding in the O's the name of Lee Oswald, Texas School Book Depository, and the telephone number. Then another phone number, which I believe was written in pencil. I asked what this number was, pointing to this pencil number, and Mrs. Payne said that is the phone where Lee was living. I asked what this number was, pointing to this pencil number. Miss Payne said that this is the phone number where Lee was living. I gave this number to Deputy Buddy Walters, told him to call the sheriff and advise him of our findings. That this was all fitting together with the assassination of President Kennedy. Then we loaded all our findings in the car and brought them. Mr. Michael Payne, taking him and findings to the Dallas Police Station to Homicide Division. Mr. Payne walked up to the house in Irving about 15 minutes after we arrived. He told us he was separated from his wife and was working for Bell Helicopter in Hearst. When he heard on the radio about the shooting, etc., he said he thought he had better come there. After delivering the evidence and subject to Captain Fritz, we then returned to the sheriff's office. It's Harry Weatherford. There's some interesting stuff here. I mean, a lot of contradiction. He's obviously fucking lying. There was no chicken on the 6th floor, so he's full of shit. How full of shit he is, who knows? The idea that... So here's the deal. Like, I have no evidence that Oswald ever worked at the book depository. He wasn't there on the 22nd. William Seymour was there in the light brown jacket, right? So what we have is we have theater. We have Oswald's name and phone number written in an address book at the Texas School Book Depository, a building that he sure as fuck didn't work at. All right, next statement. Who's this one? This one's from Ralph Walters. Name of complainant. President John Kennedy. That's a typical report. I was standing on Main Street in front of the Criminal Courts building on November 22nd, 63, and observed the presidential procession pass by. Just after it had turned the corner, and a very short time later, I heard what were shots, 3 in number. I ran around the corner and directly across the street, across the Dealey Plaza to Elm Street, to the side of the triple underpass. As we were running across the street, we could see the presidential car pull away under the underpass, and we could continue on to the immediate area. Some stopped to talk to people standing there, as there were a number of women who were hysterical. We could not get any information except that the president had been shot. Several of the other officers in the group ran on into the freight yards. After we failed to get any coherent information from people, we began searching the area, and possible 5 or 6 minutes after the time we reached the area, we went from the Texas School Book Depository, and 7 of us went inside. We were the first ones into the building from the front door, and several of us searched the first floor and moved up into the building. I took the back stairs and went to the 5th floor. Okay, so let's try to figure out a timeline on this one. Remember, I don't have any evidence of anybody entering that fucking building until any law enforcement entering that building at all till 12:37 p.m. So any of these fucks who are saying that they entered the book depository, it had to have been after 12:37 p.m. Period. No matter what they said. I believe it was really later than that. I believe it was more like 12:40 p.m. because I believe William Seymour had already been out the side of the door and out the fucking way and gone before all these cops started to pile into the building. That's what I've gathered thus far. All right, so he sees the presidential car and triple underpass, and he's running across the street. They didn't get any coherent information. We began searching the area, and possible 5 or 6 minutes after the time we reached the area, we went inside to the school book depository. All right, so yeah, so here we got 5 to 6 minutes, and he wasn't directly on scene originally, so add another minute to that. So that's minimum 12:37. There you go. My hypothesis holds true. Okay, then it says, I took the back stairs, went first to the 5th floor, didn't see anything on the floor, and continued up to the 6th floor. By that time, officers Mooney and Grandstaff were on the 6th floor. Yeah, so I'm putting this at least minimum 12:38. Probably later, though, because what's going on at 12:38? At 12:38, you got Baker and Truly with William Seymour on the stairs on the 3rd or 4th floor. And what does this guy say? He says he took the back stairs and went first to the 5th floor, and he didn't run into these guys. So this has to have been long after. This has to have been way past 12:40. This whole incident was after 12:40. No, none of these guys entered the book depository until 12:40. That's fucking reality. It says, I left the building and came to the sheriff's office to get the needed lights. On the way to the office, sorry, I lost my place here. I left the building and came to the sheriff's office to get the needed lights. On the way to the office, I picked up Deputy L.C. Smith and then met Deputy Eugene Boone, whom I had previously sent to the jail with a young boy to get film out of the camera. We then together went to the jail and got some lights and returned to the Texas School Book Depository building. We took 4 lights to the 7th floor. We stopped on the 6th floor where officers Mooney and Grandstaff were searching the floor. The other boys took the remaining lights to the 7th floor. They had by this time ascertained that there was no one on this floor, so we started a thorough search of the 6th floor. And almost immediately, Deputy Luke Mooney called out that he had found some shells in the southeast corner of the floor. I was approximately 8 feet from Mooney when he discovered the shells. I crawled up on a stack of pasteboard, boxes full of books, and looked at the sport. Mooney then leaned out of the window and called down for Sheriff Decker, who was standing on the sidewalk in front of the building, requesting the sheriff to come upstairs that he had found the shells. BK this time, there were numerous city officers gathering on the streets. About 3 minutes after Deputy Mooney called out, Chief Lumpkin and several officers from the police department came to the 6th floor and told us not to touch anything. Approximately 5 minutes later, Captain Will Fritz and several of his officers came onto this floor. There were about 8 to 10 officers on this floor by this time, and we had already started a systematic search of the floor looking for the weapon. About 2 minutes after Captain Fritz had arrived on the floor, Deputy Eugene Boone called out that he had found the rifle shoved down between 2 rows of pasteboard boxes of books. Captain Fritz took over the search at this time, and one of the other deputies who had been in the building came and told us that Sheriff Decker had given orders to let the city take over the investigation and for the deputies to return to the sheriff's office, which we did. We then brought the lights back and put them up, and by this time, the sheriff's office was so full of people and witnesses that no one could move around. I stayed at my desk awaiting further instructions. At approximately 7 o'clock, Sheriff Decker told us that we should go home and that we were to stay on call if we were needed, and he would contact us. All right, next statement from E.L. Boone. Mr. Decker, I was assisting in the search of the 6th floor of the Dallas County Book Depository at Elm Street in Houston, proceeding from the east side of the building. Officer Whiteman, DPD, and I were together as we approached the northwest corner of the building. I saw the rifle partially hidden behind a row of books, with two other boxes of books against the rifle. The rifle appeared to be a 7.65 Mauser with a telescopic sight on the rifle. Captain Fritz was called to the scene, and also someone from the ID. Pictures were taken, and Captain Fritz picked up the rifle. I first saw the rifle at 1:22 p.m. So here we go. 7.65 Mauser, right in the police report. Duh. All right, this one is from another one from Boone. All right, Mr. Decker, approximately 1 p.m. on this date, November 22nd, I was in front of the sheriff's office at 505 Main Street, Dallas, when I heard 3 shots coming from the vicinity of where the president's car was. I raced across the street, Main and Houston. The president's car and others were turning onto the Stemmons Freeway. Some of the bystanders said that the shots came from the overpass. I ran across the street and up the embankment over the retaining wall and into the freight yard and was unable to locate anything. I did locate one witness, H.W. Betzner, white male. He'd taken some photos just prior to the shots, 35 millimeter. Betzner was taken by me to the sheriff's office for a statement. I took the camera and filmed to ID and had the film developed. Betzner had 3 pictures just seconds prior to the rifle shots. The camera and negatives were returned to Betzner. The 3 pictures were retained by me. Officer Homer Reynolds, DPD, obtained a statement from Betzner. The glossy prints of the pictures were toned over to Officer Reynolds to be placed with Betzner's statement. After I had left the film and ID, I got a battery-powered light and went over to the Texas Schoolbook Depository to help with the research building. I proceeded to the 6th floor of the building to research for the rifle. I started on the east end of the building and worked my way to the west end of the building. In the northwest corner of the building, approximately 3 feet from the east wall of the stairwell and behind a row of cases of books, I saw the rifle that appeared to be a 7.65 Mauser. Second time that Boone is stating it's a Mauser with a telescopic sight. The rifle had once appeared to be of a brownish black stock and blue steel metal parts. Captain Fritz, DPD, was called to this location, and along with an ID man, DPD took charge of the rifle. Officer Whitman of Robbie Love's office was with me, and I found the rifle, and it was 1:22 by my watch. I then returned to the station. So what does he say about it? He said it appeared to be brownish, black stock, and blue steel. That's not correct. Definitely not correct. Next one from Deputy Elkins. It says from Mr. Lee Bowers at the Union Terminal, the Tower Man, as people call him, date November 22nd. I talked to the above subject who was on duty for the Union Terminal Company in a tower which is located about 200 yards west of the Texas Schoolbook Depository building. He said that he had heard somewhat sounded like 3 shots from a rifle. Said that about 10 minutes before he saw a car driving around behind the building. It was a 61 Chevy Impala white, occupied by one white male. He said it had a Goldwater sticker on the back window. He said about 5 minutes later, he saw another car in the same area. It was also occupied by one white male. It was a 1957 Ford, black, gold stripe down the side. It had an out-of-state license plate, white with black numerals, 6 digits. The occupant had what looked to be a telephone in his hand. He said he didn't know if either of these cars stopped or parked in the area. That's a very incomplete statement. The white Impala, I'm pretty confident, was driven by Emilio Santana. Can't prove it, but I'm pretty sure. I think it was the same vehicle that Rose Sherman got the boot from. All right, next one from Jack Faulkner. I was standing on the corner of Main and Houston when the presidential motorcade came by. A few seconds later, I heard 3 shots, and the crowd began to move en masse toward Elm Street. When I reached Elm Street, there was much confusion. I asked the woman if they had hit the president, and she told me that he was dead, that he had been shot through the head. I asked her where the shots came from, and she pointed toward the concrete arcade on the east side of Elm Street, just west of Houston Street. There were many officers going toward the railroad yard by this time, and I joined them in the search of the assassin. A small Negro boy came up to the Dallas uniform officer and told him that he saw a man shoot out of the window of the Schoolbook Depository. I immediately went to the depository, where I was met by A.D. McCurley, Bill Wiseman of the SO, and Joe Lorraine of the Texas Schoolbook Depository. What? Joe Lorraine of the Texas Schoolbook Depository? Who the fuck is Joe Lorraine? Jim, let's pull everything on Joe Lorraine. The fuck is that? Joe Lorraine of the Book Depository. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. We went up to the top of the building and started checking the floors, going down from the top in search of the assassin. When we got down to the 3rd floor, we talked to office workers who told us that they were looking out of the third floor window when the shots were fired from the street near the concrete arcade. We then went back upstairs to the fifth floor, and by this time, many officers were in the building, and Officer Luke Mooney found the hulls of rifle cartridges at the corner window of Elm in Houston, and when started looking on the rafters and in between the boxes of books for the rifle, Captain Will Fritz of DPD arrived on the scene, and the shells were given to him. Shortly after this, Officer Boone of the SO found the rifle near the entrance to the stairway. It was apparent that the assassin had run from the window after the shots were fired, had hidden the rifle, and then ran down the stairway. I then went up to the sixth floor where I had helped search the attic. That's Jack Faulkner. Doesn't indicate that he's a cop, and it's done on a standard... Oh, it's on a supplementary report, Stephen. So, yeah. All right, next one's from CM Jones. Mr. Decker, Friday morning, November 22nd, 1963, between the hours of approximately 12 noon to 12:35 p.m., I was standing in front of the criminal courts building talking with Alan Sweat and Robert Benavides and awaiting the arrival of the motorcade bearing the president's party. The motorcade passed in front of us. Everything appeared to be in order. A few short seconds later, I heard an explosion, followed by 3 to 5 seconds later, 2 more explosions. I am certain that I recognized the second 2 as being that of gunfire. I immediately came back into the office, going on through the back of the building and out to the street, and seeing the area swarming with officers, I mingled in the crowd in an effort to see what I could learn. I then returned to this office and went immediately to the interrogation room, where I spent the next few hours interrogating 4 witnesses and taking affidavits from them. At the conclusion of this process, I remained in the office for the further instructions. Why didn't he list their names? He interrogated 4 people and got statements from them. Who the fuck did you talk to? You see, this is like such poor police work. It's disgusting. My God. All right, Deputy Sheriff Clint Lewis. Duty report, November 22nd. Mr. Decker, following reports my activities, November 22nd. I was at home ill Friday, November 22nd, when I first learned the president had been shot. I immediately dressed and reported to the sheriff's office, where I contacted Alan Sweat, chief criminal deputy. Mr. Sweat instructed me to report to you at your station in front of the Texas School Book Depository building, which I did. I remained in front of the building to carry out your orders until and after you had returned to the sheriff's office. Upon hearing that a police officer had been shot in Oak Cliff, I accompanied John Sholkoff, Sholkoef, reporter for Dallas Times Herald. And the reporter asked for your transportation to the Texas Theater in Oak Cliff, where the suspect in the killing of the officer was supposed to be located. Robert Sholkoff and I proceeded to Jefferson and Zang's, where Sholkoff left the car, and I proceeded into the Texas Theater. Suspect had been apprehended and was leaving the theater at the time of my arrival. I returned to the station and stayed in the office the rest of the day, assisting both you and Alan Sweat. Clint Lewis, Squad 36. All right, Officer A.D. McCurley, Deputy Sheriff. I was standing at the front entrance of the Dallas Sheriff's Office at 505 Main Street, Dallas, as the president's motorcade passed by, and was watching the remainder of the parade pass when I heard a retort, and I immediately recognized it as sound of a rifle. I started running around the corner where I knew the president's car should be. In a matter of a few seconds, heard a second shot and then a third. I, along with other officers who had been standing near me, all started running, and I rushed towards the park and saw people running towards railroad yards beyond Elm Street, and I ran over and jumped a fence, and a railroad worker stated to me that he had believed the smoke from the bullets came from the vicinity of the stockade fence which surrounds the park area. A search was made of this vicinity, and then information came to us that the shots came from the Texas School Book Depository building at the corner of Elm and Houston. Officer Jack Faulkner and I, together with several other city officers, went to the building and started checking the floors. We were searching the 6th floor when Deputy Sheriff Mooney, who was also on the 6th floor, hollered that he had found the place where the assassin had fired from. I went over and saw the 3 expended shells laying by the window that faced onto Elm Street, along with the half-eaten piece of chicken that was laying on a cardboard carton. See, this is more bullshit. It appeared as if the assassin had piled up a bunch of boxes to hide from view in case anyone came up that floor, and arranged 3 other cartons of boxes next to the window as though to make a rifle rest. This area was roped off and guarded until Captain Will Fritz of the Dallas Police Department Homicide Bureau arrived. It was about this time that Deputy Eugene Boone yelled that he had found the rifle, which had been placed between some rows of the cardboard boxes near the staircase, which leads down to the 5th floor. The Dallas Crime Lab officers took over the gun, and I proceeded to help officers continue to search this building from the roof down and through the basement area. All right, next one's from Mr. Charles Polk Player. Mr. Decker, I watched the motorcade pass on Record Street from your office window. After the president's car passed, I started back to my desk. I heard 3 shots. Went back to the window. People were running in all directions. I left the office by the back door and went across the street to where my squad car was parked on the side street just back of the book depository. I drove the car onto the railroad tracks, turned the car around, and stopped heading west. Sergeant Harkness of the Dallas Police arrived on a 3-wheeler. He turned his radio to DPD Channel 2, and I had Sheriff's 37.3 and DPD Channel 1 in my car. We acted as a West command post for about 2 hours. No one was permitted to leave any of the parking lots until cleared, and then a Dallas police officer took their names. Officers were directed to search all the cars in the area, search the railroad cars, and to bring anyone in that knew or saw or heard anything. So there's a little map here drawn. It looks like they set up their command post like right behind the fence by the railroad yards. All right, next one's from Elsie Smith. Mr. Decker, just shortly before 12:30 p.m., Friday, November 22nd, I was standing in front of the sheriff's office on Main Street, watched the president and his party drive by. Just a few seconds later, I heard the first shot, which I thought was backfire. Then the second shot and the third shot rang out. I knew then that this was gunshots, and everyone else did also. I ran as fast as I could to Elm Street, just of Houston, and I heard a woman unknown to me say the president was shot in the head, and the shots came from the fence of the north side of Elm. I went at once behind the fence and searched also in the parking lot, then came from word the shot was to have come from the Texas Book Depository building on the corner of Elm and Houston. When I arrived, there were bringing in hand lights to search out at the top floor. I helped search the 5th, 6th, and 7th floors. I was on the floor when Officer Boone found the rifle behind some books. From here, I went to the remaining floors and the attic, for which we had to have the huge fire department lights and search at the attic good. Then Officer McCurley and myself went to the top of the building and searched it also. After the building was finished being searched, I returned to the sheriff's office for further duties or orders. Okay, so we got list of witnesses interviewed by Trantham. This is interesting because Trantham's a lying cunt who was in on this from the jump. Trantham was behind the book depository. He was seen by Gene Hill. He runs to the railroad yards. He's captured in the Robert Hughes film at 12:33 p.m. He's then captured around 12:38 p.m. in the fucking film arresting Larry Floor. This guy's all about it. Trantham is all about it. There's almost nothing out there on him. That's how you know who the guilty parties are. There's like nothing on him. All right, list of witnesses interviewed by Trantham. Hugh Betzner, white male, address present, Dallas, standing on the corner of Houston and Elm, and took 2 pictures. He took these pictures. 2 or more shots rang out. His camera was taken by unknown officers. He did not see anything. John Chisholm saw the shooting take place, saw what appeared to be the president's shot, did not see anything else. Bob Jackson, Times-Herald reporter, who's now at Parkland Hospital, is reported to have seen the rifle and the man fired the shots as the shots were fired. This information from Sergeant W.G. Jennings, 562, Dallas Police Department. Lee Bowers, employee at the Union Terminal North Tower, reported seeing 2 strange cars shortly before the shooting. I thought it was 3. 3 cars, not 2. Occupied by one unknown white male who was using a telephone radio mic before the parade started. Number 2 car, 61 Chevy Impala 4-door. This car was white and very dirty. Had a Goldwater sticker on the back, occupied by a white male, 25 to 30, long blonde hair. This information was from Sergeant W.G. Jennings. O.S. McVeigh, M-C-V-E-Y. Standing on top of the underpass. Also did not interview him. Information was from Sergeant Jennings. Lawrence Huber Florer, 3909 Potomac. Employed at S.L. Ewing Company, 2805 Gaston. Was behaving in a suspicious manner. Detained by W.H. Denham, 1140 Dallas Police Department. This man stated to W.I. Trantham that he was at the corner of Poydras in Maine, heard of the shooting over the radio. He saw nothing and knew nothing of this incident. All right, looks like we have another statement from, oh God, this one's like 4 pages. All right, we got this statement here from another one from, looks like Buddy Walters. But it's long as shit, and we're going to save it for next time. So it's going to do it for today, guys. I'll be back tomorrow. Thanks.